Telepaths in fiction are surprisingly rare. That's almost weird, isn't it? Mind reading is as recognizable as super strength and laser eyes, but you don't see many superheroes who run around reading minds, especially not as main characters. There are lots of psychics in other senses of the word. Plenty of main characters have extrasensory perception, moving objects with their minds and exorcising ghosts, but they rarely tip over into reading minds itself. When there are telepathic characters, it's usually a member of the supporting cast or a complete gimmick. Yeah, Psyche Kisuo can read minds, but a gag manga like Psyche K isn't supposed to be the pinnacle of storytelling. Even a character like Spy Family's Anya isn't allowed to be a fully fledged protagonist with her ability. Plenty of telepathic hijinks are off limits to her because of her age and the level of secrecy in the show. She doesn't get to run around reading minds unhindered like a character in the main cast with any other special ability might be. Of course, you don't have to think for too long before realizing why that might be the case. From a writer's perspective, a mind-reading protagonist is a logistical nightmare. How do you create any tension and suspense if your protagonist always knows the thoughts of everyone around them? How can you pull off a twist when the cards of every other character are already on the table? How are they supposed to ever lose a fight if they can figure out the next move of their opponent instantly? Opportunities for conflict are completely blunted. And there's 1,000 questions that this inclusion can bring up if you start thinking about it too hard. How close do they have to be to someone to read their mind? Do they only register thoughts or complete consciousness? Can they tell how someone's going to move before they do it? Do they have to try to do it, or is it the kind of thing that's always on? Is it overwhelming? Does it pose a hindrance to them? So of course mind readers are usually side characters, if not one-off villains. And if they are important enough to the story for logistical issues to pop up, they're almost always given some other handicap to keep things interesting. Anya Forger can read minds, yeah, but she's also a constantly confused toddler, so there's plenty of ways for the writer to still keep her in check while creating conflict. I think it's important to establish this fact, just how difficult writing a telepathic character can be, before I start talking about Sakamoto Days. Because this manga puts a mind reader front and center, and it seems like the writer made that choice completely thoughtlessly. I say this with love. Sakamoto Days is absolutely my favorite ongoing series, and I think it's criminally underrated in the West. I'm truly enamored with all its flaws, but man, does it have flaws. So, if you're unfamiliar with Sakamoto Days, I'll give the elevator pitch. Taro Sakamoto is a notorious, legendary assassin until he leaves the world of crime behind for love. He goes a whole 7 years living a mundane life with his wife and kid until an old partner from the assassination world manages to track him down, and he gets pulled back into the world of assassination against his will. It's a really simple setup for a great work of action comedy. And also, that old partner just happens to be able to read minds. You'd think that'd be kind of a big deal. Everything else about this plot might be campy, but it's at least somewhat grounded in reality. All of this could happen in our world. All of it except for a telepathic main character. So surely that detail would get some amount of weight from the beginning, right? Maybe not an entire origin story, but you'd at least have some acknowledgement of it being notable. So, here's how this guy and his ability are introduced. It's been a while, Mr. Sakamoto. It's Sheen the Clairvoyant. Sheen can read minds. And that's all the explanation we get. No one else in this manga has any special abilities, but we're not lingering on the one who does. The only other mention of Sheen's telepathy in the chapter is a line from his boss. Whoops, I forgot he can read minds. In this world, a single person being telepathic is completely forgettable. Now, I think it's pretty unfair to judge Sakamoto Days too harshly for the way they handle this early on. This manga started back in 2020, and it's still running weekly now, although there's no anime announcement. There's over 150 chapters, and everything about it has completely shifted from its origins. The art style, as well as the stakes and tone, are utterly different. In the beginning, Sakamoto Days was played as very straightforward action comedy. It had none of the depth of story that it does now, which means that when this manga first started, Sheen was a lot like Psyche K. Him reading minds was treated like a gag, and it'd be a little mean for me to pick on this manga for not taking itself seriously when that clearly wasn't the point. But, as a person who cares about writing, even a little bit, I'm obsessed with this entirely unnecessary choice. Even the tiniest details of a story are placed there with a purpose. Sheen reading minds is a lot more than a tiny detail, but it feels like a total afterthought. It wasn't necessary. This manga would have had legs the way it started without that added gimmick. But for whatever reason, Yuto Suzuki chose to include a telepath on center stage. It probably wouldn't have been noticeable at all if the manga had kept to its roots without much sincerity, but at some point, Sakamoto Days did start taking itself seriously, and Yuto Suzuki was forced to make his oddest character choice actually mean something. Telepaths are rare because when you write them, things get weird fast. And whether Yuto Suzuki meant for it to happen in the beginning, Sakamoto Days ended up getting even weirder than usual. I feel what I see others feeling or what I believe they feel. I get a lot of grief that doesn't belong to me, and that isn't real, but it hurts. Written in 1993 by Octavia Butler, Parable of the Sower is not Sakamoto Days. Unlike the weekly Shonen Jump manga I just brought up, this book is fantastically written from the beginning. It's treated like a modern classic for a reason. The main character can't read minds either. Butler chose not to open that proverbial can of writing worms in this one, but she has something similar. A condition called hyper-empathy. It isn't some magic or ESP that allows me to share the pain or the pleasure of other people. It's delusional, even I admit that. When Lauren Olamina sees someone who looks like they're experiencing pain, she feels it herself. The only difference between her and a psychic character is that what she's feeling doesn't have to reflect reality. When she was little, her younger brother pretended to be injured just to see how much she would be hurt by it. Lauren would bleed with sympathy for his injuries, only to realize he was perfectly unharmed. The world of Parable of the Sower is not a pleasant one, and it's especially bad for someone with Lauren's condition. Our society generally places a high value on empathy. Everyone wants to be seen as empathetic. It's how a freak like Shane Dawson built his brand because it made him endearing to his audience. Without empathy, we can't enjoy art or form close relationships. It's a pretty undeniably good thing to have. But for Lauren Olamina, there's too much of a good thing. Because in a world filled with people in pain, Lauren is forced to experience all of it. And if the wrong person discovers her disability, they can completely incapacitate her by weaponizing that pain. This doesn't necessarily make Lauren a kinder or better person either. She can't assist the seriously sick and the injured when she feels their pain just as strongly as they do. But beyond that, her hyper-empathy causes her to make some undeniably cruel choices. Because you can't feel the pain of a dead thing. It was a good knife, sharp and strong. I flicked it open and cut the unconscious man's throat with it. Not until the flow of blood stopped did I feel safe. The man's heart had pumped his life away into the ground. He could not regain consciousness and involve me in his agony. You don't have to help a person to end their pain. And if you're only spurned to help others because of a strong sense of empathy, because you feel their own pain so strongly, then maybe it doesn't matter what choice you make, so long as you don't have to feel what they do anymore. It isn't until the third volume of Sakamoto Days when the creator starts explaining just what exactly is up with Shin's mind-reading abilities. Up until this point, his clairvoyance is mostly used for gags, and it isn't questioned in any depth. Any setup for a backstory is completely swerved. In Chapter 23, that all changes. We find out exactly why he can read minds, and it turns out Shin wasn't born that way. It's another detail that almost makes this stranger, because psychics are almost always born, not made, but Shin was a freak accident produced in a lab. It's not as bad as it sounds, exactly. In fitting with the goofy tone of early Sakamoto Days, the lab isn't some torture factory like most places that produce psychic children are. Everyone who works there is kind by most accounts, and he has an adoptive father looking out for him. Shin wasn't experimented on, and he wasn't a test subject. He drank a test solution by mistake, because he was just a kid. It's all very One Piece, except instead of getting some goofy ability to stretch like rubber the way Luffy does, Shin gets the ability to read minds, and it immediately makes his life just way worse. Every adult in the lab who helped take care of him suddenly avoids his presence. At 10 years old, he's become an object of fear for nearly everyone in his life. Who wants anyone, least of all a little kid, to be aware of their every thought? Shin abandons the lab and runs away to make it on his own. It turns out that reading minds isn't useful for maintaining interpersonal relationships. We see time and time again how it can hurt Shin and the people around him throughout the manga. But you know what it turns out to be really, really good for? Sheen is still a child when he becomes an assassin, working under the greatest killer in the industry, all with the weapon of mind reading at his disposal. He can detect and track any target through their thoughts alone, can guess their next move, can hone his ability to the point of almost seeing the future. Reading minds doesn't make Sheen a better person, but it gives him the potential to be a killing machine. There's almost a baseline loneliness in the human experience, based on this one simple fact: we can't read minds. As much as we communicate with language, the only thoughts we'll ever be able to know are our own. No matter how close we are with another person, we can never fully understand them. Knowing that, and knowing the pain it causes, wouldn't it be nice to take a step into someone's mind? If we were able to truly understand each other, would humans cause a little less pain? In the first Kino's Journey light novel, Kino's, I don't know what you'd call it, expedition, maybe? Takes a pit stop in a town that answered those questions with an emphatic yes. In this automated utopia, scientific research has evolved to the point of a solution, much like the one Sheen drinks, that gives the drinker telepathic ability. Everyone is excited by this discovery. Every adult takes the solution all at once, and what they see is the next stage of evolution. When Kino arrives in the city, 10 years later, it appears entirely abandoned. It's not, as it turns out. You won't find another person walking on the streets or working in any of the shops, but they're still here, each alone, one to a house, all as far from each other as possible. No human in the city has spoken a word to each other in the last 10 years, all because they've been gifted with telepathy. Within a week of taking the solution, the city was in chaos. With the ability to understand the thoughts and pain of everyone around them, there was no way to carry on with civil society. Political enemies realize each other's plans and try to kill each other before the other can act. Those who are near the dying are driven mad by the shared sensation. Acts of violence only multiply, and interpersonal relationships disintegrate only from one stray thought being overheard. Everyone within these city walls is honestly, genuinely, no exaggeration about it, desperately afraid of other people. The machines have become even more advanced so that we can survive without each other, each in our own little space, doing the things that make us... He hesitated, then said happy, as if the word tasted bitter. Their next step in the evolution of humanity was created to bring people closer, to go beyond empathy. Sure, it's good to acknowledge the feelings of other people, but why not go further? To truly understand each other, isn't that the goal? But there's only so close you can be to another person before it becomes parasitic. As much as we might ask for the understanding of others, no one desires to be truly understood. Not on a level like this, one that feels less like a conversation than an invasion. To truly understand is an act of violence. Sheen uses a lot of weapons throughout the course of Sakamoto Days, really, a goofy amount. In this series, everything can be used to kill, or at least incapacitate someone. But more than anything, what makes Sheen deadly isn't his ability to aim his gun, or stab the carotid artery, or punch a guy really hard with a special glove. Sheen's telepathy is his weapon, and however he chooses to use it, to help or to harm, it's well honed and fatal. It's a kind of empathy best suited for assassination. Okay, is it working now? Let's Oh my god. Nope. Oh my god! I think it's important to establish... Oh my god, I already did that. Okay. Oh, that was weird. Oh my god! Why did I read it like that? Why? That's not how people talk.